the last thing that I actually I was talking with Manny this morning, no, this afternoon, about partition hotspotting. We've been building us in NoSQL databases our schema, and this is many schema for the e-commerce example, where you have the customer ID, which is in DynamoDB, it's called partition key, and then you have two additional keys, the invoice ID as a sort key and the stock code as a local secondary index. But the main thing is, what you have to think of is my partition key. Do I get hotspotting problems with my partition key? And this means that, for instance, when you talk about IoT use cases, and this is not a person here that's sending data in, but this is actually maybe a machine that is sending data in. So you have a partition key, and what the system does is it actually creates partitions of your data. And however it's defined with the software as a service tools, don't think you really know it, but it, like, in a few gigabytes is one partition. This would also mean if you use the partition key wrong, then one machine would always send the data to one partition. So you would put pressure on individual partitions where a lot of data is coming in or a lot of data is getting read into a single partition. You very often even have this even more if this is sequential data that is getting sequential written, like with timestamps and with measurements, that you always fill one partition and then move to the next partition, and you cannot really use the distributed manner of your databases to actually have a distributed or write into different partitions of the data. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so this is very similar to what I was trying to do originally with Hive partitioning the analytical data. Mm-hmm. It was just in a different sort of environment.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I understand correctly. Does it mean one partition is getting bigger than others? Like, for example, in IoT device, one device might send a lot of data, whereas another device might not send anything at all.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing. That's one thing, that you might have one partition that is getting bigger than the others. The other thing is that one device always writes to one partition, and then the maximum size of that partition is done. Then it moves to the next partition, and then it only fills this partition. And that basically a lot of action is happening on a single partition instead of a lot of action is happening on multiple partitions, distributed in a distributed manner. So that's a big problem, because you also see this not just with hardware servers. They also say this with DynamoDB. Basically, DynamoDB automatically supports your access patterns using the throughput you have provisioned up to your account limits, regardless of the capacity mode you choose. If your access pattern exceeds 3,000 RCU, I'm currently not sure what RCU is, and 1,000 WCU, I'm guessing this is read and write, for a single partition key value, single partition, your request might be throttled. So you also see this where they implemented this into a software as a service tool like DynamoDB, that if you partition your key wrong, if you have your partition key wrong, then everything writes or reads from a single partition, and then you have to get throttled, because otherwise you're putting too much pressure on a single machine, because these partitions are in the background distributed between the machines, and this is what they don't want. They don't want you to stall some machines. There's actually an article where I copied this out here where I put you the link into it, where they also explain how this with the partitions works, and a bit of recommendations and so on. For this use case, it's not really relevant. It's not really relevant if you think you have something like invoices and you have the customer ID as a partition key. The customer is not going to create so many invoices. So it's never going to be overpowering a system because this is manually created. And usually how this works is the system starts with a single partition and then it's going to split the partitions into multiple every time it reaches the maximum size. So for this, it's not really relevant because the customers are going to have different IDs anyways that are currently buying. But this is something to keep in mind, that the partition key actually can get you into hotspotting problems where you need to be throttled in this, or if you yourself host these services on a because you booked the instances where you just installed your database on it, then you would run into these problems. And there are ways to actually basically create this in that you actually create or prefix your keys. So you could say the customer ID gets prefixed by numbers from 1 to 10 or by different hashes, and this way the data would be written into different partitions. It would make it on the other way, so the write would be very good. It would make it more complicated to read then, because you have to actually write 10 queries to get the data out, because you need to search in 10 different ways. It always depends on what you need to do, what the use case requires.